majority of tanks that have been produced over the last century have all been created under different circumstances of their country, or whichever war they are fighting. However, none quite match the standard and universality of one tank. This particular tank, over the 70-odd years it has been around, is still used today, having over 80,000 versions of this tank made, and having served under 50 countries. The legendary Soviet T55 remains as being one of the all-round best tanks of the Cold War. The T34-55 series shares many similarities with its older predecessor, the T34. The T34 and T54 had almost the same design team and the same mindset of get armor, gun and reliability working, which meant the crew comfort was definitely not on the list. Similarities of the T34 and 54 are very apparent, with almost identical length and width of the two tanks. Apart from these similarities, the T54 was more advanced. It featured a new Model V55 water-cooled diesel engine, which was unusually positioned sideways instead of facing forward on the older T34. The transmission was placed just behind the engine, making the tank rear-wheel drive. This was a clever move as it allowed for the engine to only be in the rear part of the tank, and therefore all the space in front of the engine was free to use. The leap from T34 to T55 was not made by just those two tanks. In November of 1944, the T34's successor came, which was the T44. It formed the basis for the T54 and was a tank that largely mirrored the features of the T55. The T44 used a V54 diesel engine, which was also placed sideways, just like the T54. The T44 was originally fitted with an 85mm D5T cannon, but was later upgraded to the new 100mm LB1 gun. The turret on the early T54 was not the greatest, featuring many shot traps and curves facing inward which would deflect shells into the roof of the tank. However, this was changed in a 1949 variant of the T54, which had a similar turret to the IS-3 heavy tank, which had a semi-hemispherical cast turret, which formed the shape of an upside-down frying pan or soup bowl. This distinctive shape became the benchmark and default design of Soviet turrets, which is easily shown on tanks preceding the T55, such as the T62, 64, 72, 80 and more. The T55 was also used as a platform where they could test trial and error, and then the Soviets perfected it with the T55A. The T55A packed quite a punch for the 60s, featuring a new 100mm D10T rifled gun, which could fire APDS, APFSDS, HEATFS and more rounds. The T55A could even go 1.4 meters deep underwater, and a further 5.5 meters with snorkel. However, the snorkel took around half an hour to set up, which would not have been good for a combat situation. The T55 series used torsion bar suspension, which took up less space than the T34's Christie suspension. This is also why there is a gap between the first and second road wheels. The T55A was used by many places and many countries, such as the countries of the Warsaw Pact, North Korea, North Vietnam and China. The Soviets distributed the T55s to other communist nations. This pretty much meant the T55 was used in most wars involving tanks during the Cold War, such as the Vietnam War. This goes to show that the T55 was one of the most universal and most used tanks of the Cold War, and has evidently become one of the trademarks of the entire conflict. The nuclear bombs that had been dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which brought the end to the Second World War, showed that although it apparently showed peace, it was there to become the next weapon of the next war. The Cold War saw a nuclear arms race between the US and USSR, and therefore the tanks had to be radiation-proof for a nuclear fallout scenario. Therefore, tests were made on tanks, such as an Australian Centurion Mark III, which was tested with a 9.1 kiloton warhead, and a T55A that was tested with a 2 to 15 kiloton warhead, with both examples of the Centurion and T55 being capable of withstanding a nuclear blast. The T55A was fitted with NBC protection. The NBC protection was triggered 0.3 seconds after detecting gamma radiation. The T55 AM1 upgrade package, which is the T55 in this video with additional side skirts and added BDD turret armor, was an upgrade to the T55A which allowed for further modifications of the tank. The modifications included an upgraded V55U engine, a new Cyclone M1 gun stabilizer, and the new gunner's sights with infrared and normal optics, new RMSH tracks and improved suspension, and also a new rangefinder and Illusius eyebrows, which were named so after the man who designed them, and were also the additional armor packages on the side of the turret. The T55 has been used in many conflicts, such as the Six-Day War, First and Second Gulf Wars, and many more conflicts around the world. Other variants and modifications, such as the Iraqi T55, unofficially called Enigma, were heavily modified. However, it still stood no chance against modern MBTs, such as the Leopard 2A7, M1A2 Abrams, and Challenger 2. However, tank engagements are rare, as the Syrian civil war proves that any tank is vulnerable to an RPG or ATGM. However, tank engagements are rare, as the Syrian civil war proves that any tank is vulnerable to an RPG or ATGM. This is also the reason why Turkey lost a few Leopard 2A4s. The ATGM and handheld weapons that can kill tanks are more potent than ever and have been proven to be able to effectively kill many tanks. The T55A in this era stands no chance against its competitors and therefore is almost obsolete against tanks. Then why is the T55 still around? Well, it's cheap, reliable and easy to maintain, and smaller countries would want to purchase a tank that is very reliable and cheap, rather than an expensive to run and state-of-the-art MBT. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like, subscribe, comment and share, as it helps my YouTube page grow so more people can reach my content. If you have made it this far, then thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next week, where I will go through how I made the T55A. Thank you very much for watching and stay safe. The T55A quite packed a punch. These are also why Turkey lost a few Leopard 2A Set 4 which had a semi-hemispherical task.